BBC has confirmed reports that the Biden administration will soon provide Ukraine with anti-personnel landmines. The explosive devices, which are banned by most countries, will be used to help prevent Russian advances within Ukrainian territory. Officials said Kyiv had committed to not use them in built-up areas. Anti-personnel landmines are electrically fused and require battery power to detonate. They're designed to go off when a person comes in close proximity. They will not detonate when the battery runs out. These are banned in many countries under the 1997 Ottawa Treaty, which prohibits their use, stockpiling, production and transfer. 164 countries are signatories to the treaty. Ukraine is one of them, raising questions over the potential use of this weapon. The US, along with China, India and Russia, has not signed the treaty. In 2014, Barack Obama expressed an intention to sign up, banning the production of anti-personnel landmines. Donald Trump reversed that in 2020. But Joe Biden restored Obama's stance until this major policy shift. Ukraine says it's struck an ammunition warehouse about 100 kilometres inside Russia, in what the US says was the first time the American-provided attack missiles have been fired at Russian soil. And the US Embassy in Ukraine has closed its embassy in Kyiv after receiving information of a potential air attack. In a statement, the embassy said it had instructed all of its staff to evacuate to shelters if an air alert sounded. Our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams is in Dnipro with more.
The situation up and down that eastern front is one in which Russian forces are gradually moving forward, yard by yard, mile by mile. And there is a very keen desire in Washington to try and limit that advance as much as possible. That area of eastern Ukraine is largely made up of agricultural land, small towns, the occasional city. A lot of this fighting is taking place out in the open. It's not taking place in heavily populated areas. And the kind of landmines that are being provided by the Americans under this new move are what are described as non-persistent. They can be essentially timed to stop working after a matter of hours or up to 2 weeks. And it's all about trying to confront the Russian tactic, which up and down the front involves the Russians sending forward tiny little teams, 4 or 5 men at a time, sometimes on foot, sometimes even on bicycles. They're essentially suicide missions because they go in, they try and get in behind the Ukrainian lines, they preoccupy the Ukrainian defenses and artillery, and they allow the larger force to gradually move forward. That is what the Ukrainians are trying to confront. It's very difficult. It sounds kind of simple, but it's actually quite difficult to try and control that situation. And these landmines will allow them to try and do that. So I think that is the logic. It'll be up to the lawyers to try and convince everyone that this is in line with modern conventions. Yes, we all get very squeamish about the use of landmines, but since, for a very long time, they have been a grim but rather essential part of this kind of warfare.
And of course, it comes just after the US has also changed its approach towards the use of long-range missiles. I just wonder how much the Ukrainian forces are being bolstered over the last couple of days with the attack missiles and now being allowed to use these anti-personnel mines, being given these anti-personnel mines.
Well, it's certainly about bolstering the Ukrainian forces. It's about trying to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position for when Donald Trump takes over in January and possibly tries to persuade the two warring parties to get to the negotiating table. As far as the attackers are concerned, there's a big debate raging about exactly how important a step that is. Yes, it's an incredibly potent weapon. Ukraine doesn't have a huge number of them. At the moment, it is thought, though nothing has been confirmed, it is thought that their use is being confined to supporting their troops currently occupying that little piece of Russian territory in the Kursk region. And again, that's about having some kind of bargaining chip when it comes to negotiations. But it's all about how effectively Ukraine uses them. We've seen them already being used to hit a large ammunition dump inside Russia yesterday. Pretty devastating looking explosions at that ammunition facility. But Ukraine has to choose its targets very, very carefully because it simply doesn't have a great number of these missiles. And so any suggestion that this is in and of itself a game changer, that's for the birds. It certainly helps to give them, to perhaps redress the balance of force somewhat in this rather one-sided war.
That was Paul Adams there with his analysis. Our Eastern Europe correspondent Sarah Rainford has more on Russia's reaction to the US increasing its assistance to Ukraine.
It's talking about escalation. It's suggesting that Ukraine's Western allies are suddenly escalating this conflict. But of course, it was Russia that invaded Ukraine. This was Vladimir Putin's decision. And there are North Korean troops inside Russia fighting alongside Russian forces. Russia has been using North Korean weaponry. It's been using Iranian weaponry. So I think the rhetoric of escalation is very much on the Kremlin's side. But I think the timing and the fact that Vladimir Putin chose to sign his nuclear doctrine, essentially making it easier to deploy a nuclear weapon, is all about the messaging from Moscow. They want the world to be scared. They want Ukraine's Western allies to pause and to think twice before increasing assistance to Ukraine. But as I say, it is part of the messaging. Vladimir Putin could have retaliated with a nuclear weapon if he wanted to, without any kind of paperwork to enable him to do that.
And just briefly, Sarah, the reports coming from the US closing its embassy in Kyiv after threats of a potentially significant air attack. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, I think, this is the kind of warning that the US Embassy, I understand, gives out every so often. They're saying that there is a risk of a major airstrike today. These kinds of warnings do go out, and the warning and the messages to staff to make sure that they're in air raid shelters if there is an air raid, because there is potential information about something significant in terms of an attack by Russia. But of course, Ukraine has been under attack, as we know very well, for more than 1,000 days now. So that is nothing new as far as people living in Ukraine feel.
That was Sarah Rainsford, our Eastern Europe correspondent, reporting there from Warsaw.